Hello and welcome to another episode of Generally Speaking. Today is Saturday, January 20th, 2026. Our top story, a GOP candidate in Connecticut, US of A, state representative, state office. His name is Jaden McCormick. He promotes the hanging of gay people. And now I'm just a quick summary kind of person, so I'm not going into any details, but that's what he said, and that's what he promotes. And that pretty typically is the GOP party for you. All right, next story. In the United Kingdom, protesters were arrested for protesting what? The sale of stolen lands in Israel. Israel, the settlers, take over the Palestinians' land. And in this case, it was just the Israeli government that took it over, kicked them out, and they want to sell the property, sell it. They did a sale in New York. I don't know how that was permitted to happen. And they did a sale in the UK. Now, this is horrible, taking people's stolen land. And so people protest. And who gets arrested? The people trying to sell the stolen land or the people protesting? Well, you guessed it, the people protesting. All right, in Alaska, the GOP disqualified a candidate named of Dan Sullivan, running for Senate, I believe. And why? They wouldn't say, but there's an interesting story about Dan Sullivan. His opponent, the person he's challenging, is Dan Sullivan. What? Yes, they both have exactly the same name. And because this is such confusion and the incumbent, doesn't want somebody voting for their opponent, thinking that it's him, got his party to simply disqualify the challenger, even though he's a member of his own party. They disqualified him, saying, you don't have the right stuff. That's it. Nothing of, real. Just you're disqualified. Because that's the way these parties run. And it's the Democratic Party just as well. They didn't want to back Zoran Mamdani. They didn't want to back other left-wing candidates, and so these Democratic parties are nothing really to sing any praise about. All right, if you got this far, and most people seem to make it at least a couple of minutes in, would you please like, subscribe, and notify, and leave a comment. Always love to hear comments. I even had someone comment on my grammar that I don't know how to speak English, that I just butcher everything. And listen, I'm no eloquent Oxford graduate, but I don't think I'm that bad. All right, let's talk about something else. Have you ever watched a movie? You sit there and you watch it and you think you're seeing what everybody else is seeing. And I'm not talking about some people need glasses. No, I'm talking about if you're a man, you're seeing this movie differently than if you're a woman. For instance, if you're a man, you're focusing on what the man's thinking, feeling, doing. You're relating to him. If you're a woman, you're doing the opposite, relating to all the female roles. And you might have different impressions when the man is speaking, when the man is acting, from a female point of view. And the same the opposite way around. When you look at a movie, it's not everybody seeing the same thing. As long as we're talking male and female, this probably also goes for all kinds of other categories. If you're white, you're black, Asian, Russian, Latino, whatever, you have a whole different perspective. If you're young, if you're old, you have a whole different perspective. I know if you're old, you've got so much life experience, you might see a whole lot of different things than a youngin would see. Just think about that. When you watch this movie, there are a lot of different views of this movie going on. And, this actually extends to people in the world. Whenever you see somebody, you've got assumptions about the person that are based on what you are, male, female, or all those other categories. And what you should try to do is try to think, what if I think about this person differently? I look at this person, looks like a bum, and why don't you look at that person and think maybe that's actually like someone who's brilliant, who's got it on the ball inside, and somehow is in these bad circumstances. Or some educated person looks really smart. Why don't you think maybe they're actually a jerk, an asshole? When you're looking at partners, you ever notice how, all the glamorous people, everybody wants the glamorous people. Some of these glamorous people, they're just mean, nasty individuals inside. And some of the people who look like I'll pass, it could be the most beautiful people in the world. You don't try to think about that sometimes. All right, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to the New School. The New School is a school in New York City. It was made to study the liberal arts, sort of like a counterpoint to conservative education. It's a more liberal. Well, they're laying off staff and they're cutting courses because why? They're losing financing with the Trump administration, squeezing university grants that they have to do dependent on what the administration thinks should be taught, especially no DEI. Don't be talking about black people. Don't be talking about women. Don't do that. And so they're getting squeezed out. Poor school. Dan McClellan. He's an individual that I like to follow. This guy is deep in the weeds in religion. He's been studying this for years. He was raised religious and he's atheist now. But this guy, studies the original Hebrew texts, and I've been watching a lot of his stories, and he was talking about multiple Bibles. When people quote the Bible, talk about the Bible, there are dozens of different Bibles. Of course, everybody says, well, mine's the right one, mine's the right one. But when you get down to it, yeah, okay, that's just you saying it's the right one. And it's really interesting how many differences there are, and following the history of how the Bible was created and how parts were kept, how parts were thrown out, how things have been modified over time. Most people go to church, they don't know anything about the Bible as far as its history goes. They've heard the stories. There's Genesis, they know that, and there's a New Testament, an Old Testament. And then they hear the stories of Job and Noah and all these stories, but they don't know anything about how the Bible was built, how it came together, what pieces of paper we have and don't have, and who the authors were and who weren't. Like you got, those Gospels, Mark, Luke, and the other two guys, and nobody knows who those even are. Those are just names that got attributed to those writings. So many people don't even know that. But just wanted to mention Dan McClellan on that. In Illinois, here we go, running right along. I hope you're still with me. In Illinois, a woman was denied emergency surgery. Emergency, why? She had an ectopic pregnancy. That's the kind where the pregnancy happens inside the fallopian tube, most usually, and the baby can't grow in the fallopian tube. It's just going to kill the mother. Kill. All right, so what happened? Well, we got a lot of doctors and hospitals freaking out about doing abortions because, a lot of states now will say that you can be arrested, but this happened in a blue state where the rules for abortion were pretty loose, or at least loose these days. But what was it? It was a Catholic church. It kills me how there are so many of these religious churches, right? Saint this one, saint that one, saint the other. Well, how is it that so many of these churches are religious based? I don't know, but at any rate, they denied it. They said, nope, you can't have it. And she almost died because that's their rule. It said, well, we can do it if you're about to die, which means actually you waited too long and oops, you did die. This is where religion gets to be messed up. That's where people say they don't want a theocracy, but there we go. That's a theocracy. All right, Mike Huckabee, he's the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He made this statement that the U.S. Would not exist without Israel. There would be no America. How do you even say that? If you want to say that there's some kind of connection between the United States and Israel, some kind of religious belief connection, there's a similarities, one thing. But America was here long before Israel. So, but that's the blind Israel following that he has. Okay, the UK Appeals Court. Cases happen in courts; they can be appealed. Well, this group called the Palestine Action that tries to bring attention to the genocide in Palestine. And they've been designated as a terrorist organization, which they aren't by anybody's estimation, except for the government, the UK government. These people do perform criminal acts. They break into buildings, arms manufacturers, and they spray paint the equipment. Wow, that's really bad. That's criminal destruction. It's worthy of that, but it's not worthy of terrorism. Well, it got appealed, and the appeals court said, you know what, we're going to keep them designated as a terrorist group. This is just, we got evil people, and I've heard a lot of statements about Israel. Israel's got their claws in the in the government. But you know what? I know some people, I've talked to them about what Israel's up to, and they'll deny everything. They'll say no, no, and because they believe it. Israel is the greatest country in the world. They got formed with peaceful, hippie-loving people with flowers, kisses and loves to everyone. And what happened is the evil Arabs, just wanted to kill them. Just, started right from the front, going taking knives to their throats. And the Israelis came up there, and the Jewish people, and they took land that was desert. Nobody was even on this land. There was nobody there. And the Jewish people came in, and they turned it into, milk and honey, roses, flowing water everywhere, a beautiful bounty. And they believe this story. Israel, the most moral army in the world. They send pamphlets to people, evacuate before we blow you up. That's very nice, but they still blow you up. And when they send those pamphlets, they tell you, go over here where it'll be safe. And then they blow you up over there. But they're, just the most wonderful people in the world. All right. So, I've been trying to do a little reading on that because, sometimes I feel a little lost trying to argue with people. You don't have the facts and figures right in front of you. You know what I'm saying? So, all right. Arabs and Jews. So, again, while I'm talking about this subject, I keep hearing so many stories, like I started reading about when Israel was first being formed, even before it was being formed, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. And they keep making a distinction between Arabs and Jews, Arabs and Jews. This is, why can't people get their terms right? Arabs mean somebody born in that region, somebody from that region. You can be Jewish and be an Arab. They aren't two different things. Now, if you want to say Muslim and Jew, now you got a point, but these keep saying, conflating Arabs with not Jews is just messed up. People not thinking right. All right. The Department of Justice refuses to obey the judge's order to show that they definitely are not going to have a slush fund. So Trump complained that his tax information was released and he wanted to sue for billions of dollars. And it wasn't just him. It was a bunch of people whose information was hacked. And he said, you know what, no, I'll drop it. And just as long as I get a little compensation in the form of this slush fund, which is money that he says he was going to redirect to people like the January 6ers for having suffered going to jail for the crimes they committed. But the thing about it is, it's not just them. It's actually specifically, it says we can actually do whatever we want with it and nobody can know any better. So you can talk about giving it to the J6 people, but he could just as well just put it all into his bank account. But on top of that, there's a little line in there that says, oh, and on top of this, nobody can investigate my taxes or my income or my finances for the next 3 years. So, as long as he's in office, nobody can investigate him. You just can't do it. And any rate, so, that's being fought. And right now, the Department of Justice is saying, listen, we're dropping this whole thing, so let's just forget about it. And the judge said, listen, I want a piece of paper saying under oath, where you can be charged with perjury if you're lying, that in fact this money isn't going to be distributed. Because people can say, no, it's not happening, and then they do it anyway, right? So at any rate, the Department of Justice said, you know what, Honor, we don't have to give this to you because we're not doing anything. There's nothing going on here. So there's no need to do it. So it's like as if they get to say what's necessary and what isn't. So that's what's going on with that thing. Israel snubbed the ceasefire. There was a ceasefire recently. Supposedly, the United States said it and Iran have agreed to a ceasefire. But of course, Israel is in there, right? And Israel said, we don't have to obey any ceasefire. So they've been attacking Lebanon straight on. What will happen between Iran and the U.S. as far as that goes remains to be seen. It's a little bit strange. I've seen Israel's been attacking Lebanon nonstop. They haven't stopped. And Iran, on the other hand, has been saying, you attack Lebanon and we're going to attack you. But they still haven't. They still haven't done that. I'm wondering, when are they actually going to start dropping some missiles back on Tel Aviv? Waiting to be seen. So far, it hasn't happened. All right, let's talk about the Smithsonian Institute. I was just, watching my videos. I see all kinds of funny things. Did you know that this was created by a guy named James Smithson in the UK who's never been to the United States? He was like an illegitimate son. Illegitimate. You're not legitimate. You're a son, but, you weren't, married. Your mom wasn't married to the guy at the time, so illegitimate. At any rate, he was from a rich family, and he still managed to have some good coin on his own, and he bequeathed all his money to well, obviously not, the Smithsonian didn't exist at the time, but he bequeathed it to, some agency, some group. I got to get a sharp on that, but with the idea that this money should be used for the betterment of the general population to be educated and learned about things of the world. And so the Smithsonian was created. I'm sort of a little surprised, when you got money that is just in sort of like a trustee kind of hands, anything could happen to that money. Anything. It's kind of pretty much amazing that they actually built something like the Smithsonian. Well, they did, and that was a good thing, I think. And at any rate, so there you go. There's all a bunch of my stories for what's going on now. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave the like, a comment, notify button, and all that good stuff. And take care.